The imminent radical change to the taxation of dividends brings to advisors both opportunities and responsibilities. To take those opportunities and take care of your responsibilities, you need to obviously understand the change. They're not difficult, these changes. The changes are the first £5,000 of dividends unconditionally are tax-free for everybody, so that's easy. Over and above that, the rate of tax that one currently pays on dividends, on the effective rate that you pay on dividends, moves up 7.5%, and we get rid of all grossing up. So we're just looking at tax on the dividend that you actually receive. So okay, that's the basis, pretty easy. When does it start from? 6th of April this year, so not far off. And what does it mean? Well, for basic rate taxpayers, unfortunately, they're actually the only people that can't benefit from this because they don't pay tax on the dividends anyway. And if their dividends, which is unlikely for a basic rate taxpayer, but if their dividends in the year, all of their dividends together, exceed £5,000, then they're going to pay 7.5% tax on them, whereas currently they pay nothing. Higher rate taxpayers currently pay an effective rate of 25% on their dividends, regardless of how much they are. So they've got the first 5,000 tax-free, and they save £1,250 as a result of that on the £5,000 tax-free. What do they pay on the dividend above £5,000? Well, 7.5% more than they pay now. So 7.5 plus 25, 32.5%. That means they're going to be not worse off until their dividends exceed around 21,000 in a year. And for additional rate taxpayers, they're going to save a bit more than the higher rate taxpayers on that £5,000 tax-free. 1528. So basically they're going to need dividends of around 25,000 to be worse off. And when you translate that to a portfolio size, you go, okay, basic rate taxpayers need an unwrapped, i.e. non-ISA, non-pensions portfolio of more than £140,000 if we're assuming a yield of 3.5% to become worse off under these new provisions. Additional higher rate taxpayers are going to need a portfolio of around £600,000 to be worse off, assuming a 3.5% yield, and additional rate taxpayers are going to need around £700,000 before they're worse off. So that's quite a lot. Put a couple together, you've got £1.2 million for a higher rate tax-paying couple of unwrapped investments before they're worse off than they are currently. And a portfolio of 140 odd thousand will be tax-free dividends on a 3.5% yield, regardless of your tax rate. That's quite a powerful message to take to existing investors and also to factor into your advice strategy for new investors. So when does it make sense then to think about wrapping your investment portfolio in an investment bond to give you the tax sheltering? Well, basically, once you exceed the £5,000 tax-free, you should look at it carefully. But for higher additional rate taxpayers, if they weren't going into a bond already, you're probably looking at 25,000 of dividends before they're worse off, before they should look at putting money into a bond. But certainly the consideration starts above, for portfolios of around 140, 150,000, dependent on the yield. A bond might start to look attractive then as a means of sheltering the dividend from taxation. And the longer the investment period, the more powerful that tax sheltering becomes, because it is now clear that life companies and companies generally won't pay tax on their dividends. So you'll be sheltering those dividends inside the life fund completely tax-free. And by the wonder of compounding, the longer that period runs for, the better your benefit will be, especially if you can manage your tax outcome at the end by using the withdrawal system that's still with us, 5% withdrawals, assigning the bond to lower rate non-taxpayers, all of that. Really, really important. Other types of investor, other than individuals, just ordinary straightforward investors, other than those are trustees who get no £5,000 allowance. So they're just going to be hit with the highest rate of tax on dividends, 38.1%. So bonds should be an increased consideration for them. And also, don't forget SME owners. Now, 85% of taxpayers, according to HMRC, will be better off as a result of these changes. So where's the $2 billion of tax coming from? Well, it's coming from SME owners, largely, because those that pay themselves by way of dividend are likely to be paying themselves more than £5,000, i.e. dividend instead of salary. So when you're looking at investments for SME owners, it's reasonable to assume that if they're taking money from their company by way of dividend, they'd have already used up their £5,000 allowance. So bonds for SME owners may be something to consider carefully. So lots to think about. We've covered this in great detail, this subject of dividend opportunities within Techlink. Go into Techlink under the heading dividends and look at the bulletins for dividends. And we look at all of those investor types, individual investors, higher and additional rate taxpayers, trustees, companies, SME owners. Worth a good look. Certainly worth a good look to prepare yourself forgive any patronising tone, before meetings with clients to discuss this really, really important change that's going to happen very soon.